Stormtroopers are one of the most iconic images in the Star Wars franchise, which is kind of weird when you really think about it.
All right.
Until Finn arrived in The Force Awakens, we never met a Stormtrooper with a meaningful role or personality. En masse, they represent the power of the Empire, but unlike Darth Vader, they're not cool or impressive. Stormtroopers are better known for being incompetent, outwitted by the heroes, and tripped up by slapstick failures. Yet, despite all this, they're a perennial favourite among Star Wars fans, both in terms of merchandise and as a costume choice at fan events. That's a very different image compared to the villains from other media franchises, like Marvel's neo-Nazi organisation Hydra, or the Death Eaters in Harry Potter. They are definitely not seen as marketable mainstream brands, whereas the Stormtroopers somehow are. And that's probably thanks to the design of their uniform armour, a distinctive costume that instantly made its mark when the first film came out in 1977, overriding the Stormtroopers' narrative role on screen. Yes, unlike some other episodes where I've explored the costumes of an entire movie, Stormtroopers are getting a whole episode to themselves. And I promise they're worth it. Hi there, I'm Gavia Baker-Whitelaw, and this is Behind the Scenes, decoding the world of costume design. The original Stormtroopers were designed by concept artist Ralph McQuarrie and costume designer John Molo, two of the key creative minds behind the first Star Wars movie. Like all of the costumes in Star Wars, they took a lot of direct inspiration from real-world sources. Named after Nazi shock troops, Stormtroopers combine threatening imagery like skulls, Nazi helmets, and a shark-like downturned mouth. Their helmets disguise their identities, rendering the Stormtrooper army as a faceless ocean of robotic soldiers. This plays into the fascistic desire for uniformity, contrasting with the ragtag nature of the film's heroes, who are mostly free to dress as they please. It also makes Stormtroopers easier to kill in a family-friendly movie, because the audience never gets a chance to sympathise with them. We simply don't care if the heroes kill them off. This made it all the more compelling when The Force Awakens revealed the truth about later generation Stormtroopers like Finn, who were kidnapped and brainwashed as children. It's really too bad that the films didn't explore this idea in more depth, but you can understand why that happened. By introducing the idea of a sympathetic Stormtrooper, The Force Awakens undermined their role as faceless, disposable villains who don't feel pain.
Freeze! Don't move!
We surrender.
Star Wars is famous for its deep, complicated world building. But depth isn't actually the reason why it works. In every Star Wars film, visual flair is the first step to success. The heroes and villains have memorable costumes, packed with symbolism. Different planets and locations are carefully designed to evoke specific ideas and feelings. And even if they only appear for a couple of minutes, the franchise is full of aliens and spaceships that viewers will remember for years to come. The Stormtroopers are a great example of this thoughtful visual design, because most of the time they're basically just background scenery. They're a cross between cops and foot soldiers, and their most memorable scene in the first movie doesn't involve any actual Stormtroopers at all. It's when Luke Skywalker steals some Stormtrooper armour to rescue Princess Leia.
A little short for a Stormtrooper.
Huh?
The original Stormtroopers never do anything interesting, and we don't need an explanation for what they are. It's all clear from what we see on screen. Throughout the franchise, we see obvious visual patterns between the heroes and the villains. Good guys usually wear practical outfits in organic colours, symbolising their connection to nature. Or they wear colourful, individualistic costumes, showing their personality and freedom. There's a lot of variety among the rebels, because they're a diverse group of allies, rather than a uniform army of obedient soldiers. Meanwhile, the villains mostly dress in black, white or grey, sometimes with red accents. Their clothes are harsh and angular, and the Empire favours brutalist architecture and mass-produced technology. In Western media, pure white is usually used to denote innocence, like Leia's outfits in Episode 4. But Star Wars also includes white in its aesthetic of evil, with the Stormtroopers looking like bleached skeletons or sterile plastic robots. They represent death, while the heroes tie into the idea of the living force, representing the diversity and vibrancy of nature. Only in later years did we learn the origin story of the Stormtrooper uniform, beginning with the Mandalorian armour of Jango Fett, who is cloned to create the clone troops of the prequel trilogy. Their armour evolves gradually from beige with colourful decorations to the gleaming white army of Episode 4. Star Wars political storytelling is easy to understand, relying heavily on fascist imagery while portraying the Empire as straightforwardly evil. But there's a great deal of complexity beneath the surface, illustrated more thoroughly in spin-off materials and subtext. In the case of the Stormtroopers, the more you think about them, the more parallels you begin to notice in real life. In 1977, Star Wars felt revolutionary because it presented a grimy view of science fiction. This world included regular working people, petty criminals, and clashing political factions. It wasn't glossy or futuristic, and rather than being a fantastical kind of dystopia, its view of an authoritarian state felt rooted in reality. There's no distinction between the military and the police, and the Stormtroopers' main role is to intimidate civilians, kill the Empire's enemies, and obey orders without question. Obviously, they do nothing to help people or make the galaxy a safer place to live.
Hey, stop right there!
Unlike most Hollywood movies, Star Wars isn't interested in presenting law enforcement in a positive light. These films would be very different if the Stormtroopers wore softer outfits and exposed their faces. Their uniforms make it easier to lump them together as anonymous antagonists, a political choice that reflects real-life trends. In the decades since the first Star Wars movie came out, American police have shifted closer and closer toward the imagery of the Empire. We are now used to seeing police officers wearing heavy tactical gear. SWAT teams are also massively overused. Modern police forces have access to military-grade weapons, vehicles, and body armour, along with masks that conceal their identities and facial expressions from the public. There's a link between militarised uniforms and a rise in police brutality. When armed officers wear a mask, they can avoid accountability and guilt. When they dress like soldiers, they begin to act more like soldiers. And for obvious reasons, people respond very differently to a police officer wearing casual clothes versus body armour and a helmet. This kind of uniform sends an unavoidably aggressive message. In Star Wars, the Stormtrooper armour serves a dual purpose. It intimidates civilians, but it also keeps the Stormtroopers themselves in line. It discourages individuality and emotional connections. They can't see each other's facial expressions or speak without their voices being recorded through their helmet microphones. And as we learn in The Force Awakens, Stormtroopers are punished for removing their helmets.
And who gave you permission to remove that helmet?
Finn's big turning point begins with him tearing off his helmet to reveal a youthful, expressive face underneath. Considering all this political and symbolic baggage, it's interesting to see how Star Wars fans have embraced the Stormtrooper brand. There's a massive contingent of Stormtrooper cosplayers out there, some of whom belong to the 501st Legion, a long-running fan club that organises costumed events and raises money for charity. And when people see them at conventions, those Stormtroopers are greeted happily by adults and children alike. Many of us would hear alarm bells if we met someone wearing Punisher paraphernalia, because the Punisher is now associated with violent far-right extremism.
Stay calm, stay calm. I am calm.
But despite their central place in a fascist allegory, Stormtroopers somehow avoided this fate. That might be because they're not actually scary. Repeatedly portrayed as incompetent idiots, the heroes defeat them with ease. So while Stormtroopers play into some relatively well-drawn political world-building in the films, they can still be reduced to a punchline with no emotional impact. This allows their distinctive design to be enjoyed on its own terms, as a memorable, but ultimately harmless, Hollywood brand. Thanks for watching Behind the Scenes. If you enjoyed this video and you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. It really helps us out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.